Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for showing up. It's the last day. I know some of you had probably a long night last night, so we really appreciate it. We were wondering before if there would be more people in the audience than on stage, so a heartfelt thank you from all of us. If you've come for the Identity in the Metaverse panel, that's going to be the first disappointment because we're still in the universe with this panel. So you're going to see what's next, hopefully at the next panel. You see a lot of names behind me, and those names are the authors of the Jain paper, which was presented for the first time in September of last year, less than a year ago. I'd like to highlight one person here again. He was one of the very first people who fell in love with the idea of the paper and global interoperability. He was the first, one of the first people to join, and he was instrumental for a lot of the other names that you see here to be on there, and that's Kim Cameron. As most of you will know, he wrote the Laws of Identity, and his support was really instrumental. You'll see two of the original authors here, Ned and myself, but I am incredibly excited that the family of Jain is growing, and we want to start with a brief round of introductions and tell you who's here.
Thanks, Dan. My name is Sanjay Jain. I am a part of the modular open source identity platform. We help governments issue national IDs, and very excited to see how we could make them interoperable around the world.
Sanjay, before you pass on the mic, you are too modest. You have 3 amazing successes under your belt. That's 3 more than me. Can you tell me a little bit what they are?
So I was part of the team at Google about 15 years ago. We created a product called Google Map Maker, which is a wiki for maps that's been responsible for Google Maps in 170 countries, including India and China. I was a chief product officer of Aadhaar, which has issued 1.3 billion IDs to date. And I was one of the people who wrote the document, this protocol behind UPI, which last month did 5.5 billion transactions. So.
I'm Drummond Reed. At Avast, I'm Director of Trust Services from Avast acquisition of Evernym, where I was Chief Trust Officer. I'm also one of the steering members at the TrustRP Foundation, and I spent 7 years on the decentralized identifiers specification that's almost done at W3C.
Hello, my name is Ankur Patel. I lead product development for decentralized identity and verifiable credentials at Microsoft. I get to ride on the shoulders of these giants as they invent these wonderful ideas and have the hard job of turning into a product that everybody can use. I'm incredibly excited to be part of this conversation today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sakimura, chairman of the OpenID Foundation. Started OpenID Connect, FAPI, JWT, and a bunch of other stuffs. And I'm very happy to be as one of the first person to start writing the Jain paper, and I saw a lot of my presentations, the graphics that I created during the conference, which was good.
So we were actually asking Andy if we could have a soccer team of people here. We did that at EIC in Berlin. Unfortunately, from the stage, we can't really see any one of you, but I think a lot of other co-authors are actually here in the audience. And we are just really, thank you very much. Yes, 1, 2, 3, at least people I see here. So Jain is really about you. This is not about us. This is not about a new organization. It's not about people who are trying to do this for themselves. It is really about the spirit of cooperation and interoperability. Jain stands for Global Assured Interoperability. And one of the questions that we are being asked is, so what is the problem that we're actually solving? Why do you need interoperability? And if so, why on a global level?
So I come from the national ID side, which is different than most of the people in this room. And generally, when you issue IDs to citizens, we want it to be a digital ID. Part of the reason for that is that it becomes usable in many other contexts. And for that reuse, you need to have standards. And those standards, it's great if they're cross-border because the same software can work across in India or the US or South Africa or wherever else these IDs go. And so I think it makes sense for us to find a way for this to work. And a lot of trust in the IDs comes from the government-issued IDs. And so if we start, at least from my perspective there, it will then follow into everywhere else.
I don't think anyone could have been at this conference for the last couple of days and not walked away and said, I think this verifiable credentials thing is happening. And so from my perspective, having done this for now a quarter of a century, I do think it presents us with a really an amazing opportunity that we all use, and many of us used on our way here, a credential to pass over international borders, right? But the passport system took 60 years for all nations of the world to agree on. And I've learned some things recently as we were working on COVID credentials that it's still pretty creaky in some places. So the internet goes a lot faster than that, and identity a little slower than the internet. But I think we have an extraordinary opportunity here to say these new credentials could actually work everywhere, and that's going to benefit all of us.
Either way. I think this is as much an interest of civic world as well as commercial world, right? So I'll be the commercial person in this conversation, therefore. Microsoft's mission statement is to empower every person in business to achieve more, not the 2 billion or so that we touch every day. What about the other 5? That comes through cooperation because they have other choices to make for their context, and it comes through that partnership. And so as excited I was about the version 1 of GAIN paper, which focuses on today's identity systems, I'm even more interested in the second phase that Drummond's describing around how do we bridge these worlds together, where you have portability of credentials, where you have privacy, where you have better governance and control that is local law appropriate, as opposed to this one sledgehammer thing that we all have to agree on that does take 60 years to go pull off. So I'm super excited that we can all work together and in an open, transparent way. There is no closed forum. So super interested in seeing that we can actually bring this to life sooner rather than later, as opposed to 60 years.
So the original ethos of GAIN 1 paper was to recreate a trust over the internet. In the beginning, the internet was kind of closely knit thing that everybody knew actually everybody else. Not really, but every admin knew every other admins, and the admin knew everybody under him, right? So if you do something wrong, then your phone rings, and whatever are you doing? So that was a kind of trust model there, but after the commercialization of the internet, we lost it, right? And now, but there are siloed, trusted networks over the internet from here and there, and the ethos of GAIN 1 is to knit them together again so that we can have trusted, overlay of trusted network over the current internet. And we still keep it the internet, not the fragmented internet.
So after the paper, we started with a POC. Nat, maybe you want to say something about the POC, since under the auspices of the OpenID Foundation?
Yeah, so a bunch of people are coming together, the POC community group, and bringing their implementations in the sandbox, minimum viable stuff to do the interops. So Bank ID Sweden, ES ecosystem, Authority from Japan, the Hello from US.
InfoCert, InfoCert, MOSIP.
Yeah,
And so we're all using OpenID Connect for identity assurance. So
yeah,
we're basically using a protocol where we are not just providing, or where identity providers are not just providing the data itself, but they're also providing metadata describing the underlying data. So if you are a relying party, you understand exactly what data you're getting, and you can make a decision whether you want to trust that or not. And we're on our way and excited. And I hope you realize, this is really a keynote panel, but actually it's an advertisement. We are trying to get as many of you as possible to join that POC, because I think at the end of the day, if we want this to be a collaborative effort, if we want this to be something that we're doing together, we need people to show up. We need people to say that this is the future we want. We're interested to work together. And I think we have this amazing opportunity to create something that is not owned by any one company, not even any one not-for-profit organization, but it's really something where standardization organizations that talk about cooperation within the organization are doing the very same thing as they are coming together as standardization organizations. And that's why I'm really excited about it. So Ankur, you were already starting to say you're more excited about what's next. What do you think is going to be next? If you have a glass ball and you look in the future, where are we going to be in a year?
So I don't know about future, but I can say discreetly what we are going to work on together, right? Which is all of this community together has done an amazing job of building easy to use and secure credentials facing intranet, the bubbles that we talk about, inside company boundaries or federations and collaborations across company boundaries. But we don't have such trusted credentials that are internet facing, that can work beyond borders. And we saw some start of it this week with verifiable credentials interop profile. And our hope is that we can extend that to support the other scenarios that the community has been describing and give working implementations of it and have these sandboxes where we can connect large systems like Aadhaar as root of trust and others like European Union Digital Identity Initiative to corporate attestations like you're a verified employee or a verified student. And all of these flow in a way that is truly user-centric, not just in the talk sense, but technically speaking, it is user-centric. And I'm super excited to see that become a reality this year, if we can.
I want to second that. In March, Avast acquired a second company, SecureKey, that I then learned was already part of working on Jain and the interop profile. And I got even more excited because Evernym had been known for working on digitalizing wallets and SSI. Bringing these together, and which is all happening under the direction of Charlie Walton, who was formerly the VP of Identity at MasterCard, the whole vision is, in fact, interoperability of a global network, right? Which is why it was immediately, okay, let's see what we should be doing with Jain. I'm seeing here at this conference and with this panel and all the discussions that the mission now of Avast, which is known as an antivirus company and a cybersecurity company, the whole company is now shifting to say the future of cybersecurity is now decentralized digital identity. If we can solve problems like phishing, so many of what you have to do to protect individuals and companies today starts to go away. So the mission of Charlie's unit called the Digital Trust Services is the empowered consumer, right? This is how we're going to empower those consumers. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, I think I have to echo everything here, but coming from again, the civic perspective, the whole idea of an individual in a country having rights on the data, being able to control it, requires a digital ID. It requires the ability to give consent to use the data, to log these consents, et cetera. And many of those, I think, are coming through both the credential itself plus the log of, when you start to exchange it, what gets left behind, and that allows people to be able to say, look, I gave my data to him, but not to him. I don't know how he has my data. And those kinds of constructs will end up in, I think, a better society for all of us. And so very excited to be pushing towards that.
Oh, and may I add, we are not only thinking about rich man's society, the developed world, but also the developing world, where like connection is intermittent, electricity availability is iffy, and things like that. And you can't ask them to buy a smartphone, right? So we're trying to be inclusive in those use cases, and it's going to have a different user interface, but still, this user-centric identity should be usable in that kind of use cases as well.
I mean, that's exactly my user base, right? Is exactly that, where we can't be sure of a smartphone, we can't be sure of connectivity, and we have to operate in those environments. So I think you're right. That's got to be a very important part of what we do.
Can I just say how unlikely this panel is for me? And I still have moments where I think, pinch me, is this real? I remember when we started this paper, and it was just 3 people, 4 people, and then a 5th person joined, and a 6th person joined, and then I know it was Don who said, well, maybe we get 100 people, and we said, okay, well, let's try to see if we find 100 identity experts around the world. And then the paper came out, and one of the authors said, well, actually, I know Pramod, who's a colleague of Sanjay. Let me introduce this idea to Pramod. He's the architect at Aadhaar. And we had scheduled a 15-minate conversation, and I thought, how do I convince someone who's responsible for an identity scheme with 1 billion verified identities that global assured interoperability is a good thing? And we have the conversation, and I'm trying to do this pitch why global interoperability is important, even for someone as great and mighty as Aadhaar. And after about 60 seconds, he interrupts me and he says, no, I read the paper, I like this idea. We are in, but let's talk about what's next. And what's next is that Sanjay is sitting here at a keynote panel, and Microsoft is here at a keynote panel, and Drummond, who's playing a huge role, not just at Avast, but also in trust over IP, is on a panel with the chairman of the OpenID Foundation. I believe if this is the future we want, if the future that we want is one of interoperability and cooperation, this is really what we need. So I am incredibly excited that you're all here on stage. Now, in very concrete terms, what is it that we would like to ask you to do? So one thing, if you have data and you are an identity provider and you're interested to participate in the Gain POC, please come find one of the co-chairs of the Gain POC and join as an identity provider. If you're not an IDP, but you require identity data and you're interested to ingest that directly from the source, consider joining the Gain POC as a relying party. And we very much hope that we have a couple of announcements in the not too distant future about verifiable credentials. And we hope to have another call to action about that as well. One more question that I have, and we don't have a timer here, so you need to tell us when you want to kick us off the stage. But one more question that I have is there something that you learned as part of this process? So I can say from my perspective, something that I learned that really struck me, and that was when we were speaking with Mosip, and we heard that comment, and it was a discussion about zero-knowledge proofs and a discussion about verifiable credentials, and then there was this question of, how does this work if people don't have a smartphone, and maybe they don't even have a feature phone. Maybe all they have is a piece of paper with a QR code. And I thought for me that was a really interesting moment of a learning experience of saying, wow, that is really enriching. This is interesting to see other use cases that we didn't even think about because we assume that everyone has at least some sort of phone. Is there something in this process that you've learned, that came out of it that you found interesting?
So I think we keep referring to places where phones are not present and them being distant from our everyday life. it couldn't be farther from it. There are plenty of enterprise customers here who do medical devices or go into rooms that are clean rooms where cell phones are not allowed, or you need smart card access to a transport system. There's a whole bunch of analog systems today that we deal with, including people, where presenting a cell phone and holding up to someone's face is not an appropriate gesture to go do. So I think one of the things I have come to learn is that these scenarios are just as applicable in our lives as we project them to be far away. We needed to start somewhere. And I think it's a good place to start. But I've been incredibly grateful for people designing these standards and protocols to have made sure that they were transport agnostic. They had thought about interaction models that could be extended to the augmented reality and virtual reality interactions where it would not be appropriate to, I don't know how to scan a QR code inside an augmented reality headset. So these are real scenarios for all of us. I don't think it's a far enough removed reality.
And you know what? So it's been my to-do thing to write a kind of joke RFC on the something called OpenID Connect avian carrier binding. All right? I've been trying to do that since like 2011, but the time is not good because in Japan, the end of the March is the end of the fiscal year, and you're likely to be scrambling for finishing off all the projects, and I never got to write it. But when I thought about it, I actually had real use cases. Not even the developing countries like Kenya. I mean, that's going to be very real, and I grew up in Kenya, so I kind of feel it. But even Japan, that's kind of popular. So there are network segregations, and you're not allowed to connect to networks, right? What do you do? Maybe QR code, right? So this kind of thing is actually very near us.
Actually, what we've been doing in India is working on many dimensions of trying to get people to own their data. And we recently have been working with verifiable credentials on the education space, education skilling and things like that. And I think the whole idea of where we've now had these in separate silos and now we sort of see them suddenly coming together is very exciting because it's no longer about these silos, whether it is skilling or whether it is health or finance. These are the three spaces in which we've done a fair amount of work. And it's, so vaccine credentials. So in India, we issue QR codes for everything, just so you know, right? I mean, our vaccine credential is a nice big QR code. So is my ID and so is my payments. And all of it's now coming together in a way which is very exciting. And so it crosses these silos. And I'm sure everybody here would agree that that's what we are heading towards.
So if we now have the technical capability to connect these silos, and not just what passports do, which connect silos of governments, but now, between the centralized systems and the federated systems and the decentralized systems, we can connect all the silos. That's sort of the job here. Then I want to point out the lesson that we learned that really led us to start the Trust ORP Foundation, which is the hard problem is no longer technology, right? The hardest problem with identity is people, right? We're very complex creatures, and we build very complex cultures and countries and groups. And connecting those, we have to respect all of them. I love after the GAIN panel at the European Identity Conference, one of the first questions was asked by Kalia, better known as Identity Woman. It was, where is civil society, as you pointed out. I think for what we're going to do here, we need to bring civil society. They need to be equal partners at the table, and we need to look at the non-technical parts of the problem just as deeply as we look at the technology. Because I think we can solve that part. And I think we can solve the other part, but it's going to take a lot of work.
I would like to add to that where, if anything, technology, one of the lessons along the way has been we're lagging to our analog interaction models. We can't keep up with the simple gestures of establishing trust and delegating something and taking it back and all these things that we do very normally and naturally all over the world. Very difficult to do, actually, in a safe way. And I think the new challenge for us as the identity community is to not only think about ease of use and security now, but going forward, equal citizens will be privacy and portability, which we haven't really done such a good job on. And to make it work for the world, not an easy task. But we have a good start to it, and there's a lot of good examples, as Drummond was pointing out, that we can build on. And I think in our pre-check we were talking about don't let perfect with you and you have good. So how do we make sure we make measured progress and be transparent, be open about that feedback to say, like, where is this appropriate and where is it not appropriate? That would be equally important.
And also, it's really important to be able to communicate to non-identity people, right? To the normal people, how to communicate to your mother and things like that. You know, we all need to come together for that.
I would like to close with a question that one of my kids posed to me. I have 3 children, and the youngest is 8 years old, and she asked, why do you have to go to this conference? And I was thinking about it, and I think here's the reason why I'm at the conference and why I am here at this panel. We are witnessing a time that drives a lot of countries and people apart. We are witnessing a time when a lot of people advocate for national solutions, where a lot of people are advocating to look inwards. You know, we need to control our resources. We need to make sure that gas or oil or information does not travel. And I am convinced that now more than ever, we need to be able to speak languages that each and every one of us can understand. And that is true for any kind of language. It is true for, you know, the language we speak here, that we have someone from Japan who grew up in Kenya, and we have someone from India, and we have someone from Austria, and I think, Drummond, you were born in the US, and we're all able to speak English. If we lack that capability when it comes to our standards, if we don't have an opportunity to show a driver's license in Nairobi or in Tokyo, if we lack that basic opportunity, it is going to come to hurt and haunt everyone here in this room and everyone here on stage. And I believe that as we are coming together and as we're trying to create standards that are globally interoperable, that preserve privacy, that are secure, we are doing something that is not just a commercial opportunity. Of course, you know, we all need to make money and we all have our ideas on where this might fit into our business plan, but I think we're actually working on something here that is more important than that. That's the reason why I'm here. I know that this is the reason why a lot of the people who are on this list are on this list, and I hope it's a reason why at least some of you here are going to decide to come and join us and embark on a journey of cooperation rather than living in splendid isolation. Thank you very much again. It was a great honor to be here.